Hello and welcome back. Eddie Radosevich, George Stoia here. Welcome back to the SoonerScoop.com YouTube page. Day 3 from SEC Media Days, our third and final day from SEC Media Days. Even though they are going to have a fourth, we're getting out of town. Headed on I-35 North. See you, Dallas. Maybe stop by the JFK thing. I don't know. Can't do that right now. I don't know. The algorithm's going to put us in a weird spot. Georgie boy, how are we? We
had some audio issues yesterday, and hand up, I think they might have been my fault.
Well,
I suggested we use two mics, and that didn't work out.
You have gotten the microphone taken away. We apologize to everybody out there. I know that everybody wanted to get that.
Also, if you couldn't listen on an Android phone, because that seemed to be a lot of the issues, well, you're a loser anyways. You're like Josh McCuistion. If you are using an Android phone, you're a crazy person.
Shots fired, indeed. We caught up with some old pals today here in Dallas. Jeff Lebby, Mississippi State, was here. Zach Selman, it was good to see him, the athletic director, former, deputy athletic director down in Norman. Obviously the Selman family in Norman is basically they are Norman. Yeah. To a certain extent. But we did talk to Jeff Lebby. You asked him a couple questions. It was kind of a little bit of a good insight, though. Obviously, Jeff Lebby has a good relationship with Brent Venables. He has a good relationship with Jackson Arnold, quite obviously, getting him to Norman. And then, obviously, Seth Littrell, Oklahoma first-year offensive coordinator. I guess just in terms of seeing Jeff up there, was it weird to see that?
It was, just because the last time we saw him, I believe, was the post game. Was it TCU? Was that the final game?
We did not talk to Jeff Lebby very often at the end of throughout the 2023 season.
Yeah, and I want to say that we asked him at that press conference, because it was that at that point the Mississippi State rumors had started to pop up, and we asked him, are you interested in a job like that? And he kind of scurried around the question, which gave us our answer. But getting to talk to him, I thought was interesting. Getting to ask him a couple OU questions. Obviously, he's stepping into a huge role at Mississippi State. How did the last 2 years maybe help him prepare that? And he talked a lot about Brent Venables and how appreciative he is of giving him that opportunity a couple years ago, seeing kind of how Brent built that thing up, and then also his thoughts on Jackson Arnold, which he didn't give a ton of insight into Jackson, but I thought it was interesting the words he said about him. And then I also asked him about Seth Littrell.
All right, let's jump into it. Here is Jeff Lebby talking on Wednesday in Dallas at SEC Media Days about his relationship with Brent Venables, as well as kind of what he learned over the last 2 years while in Norman.
Yeah, getting the opportunity to work for Coach V for the last 2 years, he did. He created an opportunity for me to go back to my alma mater and be able to get that thing off the ground with him. A great experience for me is being able to see him do it from year 1 to year 2, and being this great coordinator who had an incredible amount of success, and then being able to get into that head coaching chair and find ways, man, just to keep getting better. And it was all about what's best for the program. It's all about what's best for the people inside our room. As consistent of a leader and a man as there is, I believe that in all of college football, and indebted to him, man, forever for giving me that experience. Part 2 to the question, obviously Jackson, I think everybody understands who knows that scenario and relationship, knows how I feel about him and him having the ability to continue great quarterback play at that university.
Obviously some bright stuff there, from Jeff, just in terms of his relationship with Brent Venables. It wasn't necessarily a situation he wanted to get out of Norman. I mean, you take the head coaching job at Mississippi State, and that's something we've talked about here on the Scoop Show. We talked about it on the podcast. I think it's a known. I don't think anybody is under that assumption or that, I guess, notion that he was just trying to get out or anything like that. But At the same time, obviously some good stuff about Jackson Arnold. But I did think it was kind of interesting. It was the third question that you asked Jeff on Wednesday was about his relationship, and not only just his relationship, but just the similarities in offense between what he did the last 2 years in Norman and what Seth Littrell is going to do this year.
Yeah, I think it's been really interesting because, and it's kind of gone under the radar of Seth Littrell being the offensive coordinator, taking over that role from Jeff Lebby. What is it going to look like? Because I think that Jeff Lebby obviously comes from the air raid, or I guess he comes from the spread. Seth Littrell comes from the air raid. How do you kind of marry those two things together? Seth Littrell was running Lebby's offense in the Alamo Bowl, so we didn't really get a glimpse into what Seth wants to do. We also haven't talked to Seth since the Alamo Bowl, so it's kind of hard to say what is that going to look like. So I thought it was interesting to hear Jeff, talk about Seth. Obviously, they worked very closely together. Seth was in all the quarterback meetings last year as an offensive analyst, and it sounds like Seth is kind of taking a little bit of Lebby stuff, taking a little bit of his stuff to make it work at Oklahoma.
You can call it what you want to call it. I think that like the buzzword that was out there was continuity when Seth was promoted, when Joe John Finley was also promoted as co-offensive coordinator. But it was somewhat interesting. Here is Jeff Lebby talking about kind of the similarities between his offense and what they did the last 2 seasons in Norman, and maybe what Oklahoma fans are going to see in 2024 with Seth Littrell.
Yeah, I think there's a ton of similarities from a run the ball first mentality, that toughness and the lines of scrimmage. There's great familiarity from a system standpoint. Some guys that he had hired at North Texas were guys that were inside the tree for a long time. So he had kind of made that change. He had made that change and been much more our style. You know, he brings a ton of experience. He just brings experience as a head football coach. He brings great experience as a coordinator and a play caller, and a guy that's done it at a really high level. He does right by the people, does right by the kids, and he's going to fight his butt off for his university.
You know, one of the fun things that we have been able to do here on Wednesday is because Oklahoma obviously went on Tuesday. Everything's wrapped up from the Oklahoma portion of coverage from Dallas. We've been able to talk to some of our buddies, some of the guys that are still banging around here down in Dallas around the Omni. I wouldn't say that.
It's you or Lucci.
Well, that's good company to be in, I would imagine. We did talk about maybe doing some storm chasing with the great Billy Lucci at some point in the coming future, which maybe we could put on Soonerscoop.com YouTube page. I think that would do some numbers, trying to get Josh Pate out there as well. He would have to lead us around, obviously. He's the professional when it comes to that. But we were able to catch up with the great Andy Staples today. And, I think that one of the things that when we are talking about Oklahoma is year 3. I mean, obviously, Brent Venables in year 1, it was a little bit of a disaster going 6-7, but you had the bounce back year. Now you're entering year 3 where it's going to be kind of interesting. Oh, by the way, you're entering the SEC.
Yeah, I think Andy is a great person to talk to because and you'll hear me say this in several of the interviews we do, but we do get stuck in this OU bubble that, we kind of get caught up in what we think and what everybody else thinks in Norman. And I think Andy has a good pulse on just about every team in college football, especially in the SEC. And I thought he said some interesting things about Brent where he believes in Brent. I think he's made that pretty clear. He believes Oklahoma's going to be pretty good next year and maybe even go – I think he ended up giving us a prediction of 9-3. So getting his –
Spoiler, I guess.
Yeah, spoiler alert. You can check that out on Sooner Scoop YouTube's page. Great interview. We talked about a lot of different things, including some food that you guys need to check out on all these road trips. But I think just him talking about Brent, what he's built the last 2 years, sure, sometimes it doesn't always maybe show up on paper, but he believes in the long-term future of this thing, and I think he also thinks that OU could maybe exceed expectations this year.
It is a good outside, reference point for Oklahoma fans to get a little bit of a pulse check from across the country, and nobody better than Andy Staples. Here he is talking about Brent Venables and the expectations heading into year number 3.
Well, I just think we need to see the game management piece of it, and it's weird because you've got 2 new coordinators, and so that's going to be a factor as well. And I realize the offense is still going to be similar, and they've got the defense. I was talking to Billy Bowman, and he said, we understand the defense better than we ever have. And he said, I said, how, when did you really feel comfortable with it? And I said, was it last season? He said, actually, it was kind of this spring. So that's the thing. We saw it at Clemson when Brent went there. Like, it took a minute for the defense to really understand what they were doing. And then as Oklahoma learned the hard way in the bowl game that year, like, once they got it, they got it.
And once again, thank you to Andy for joining us. We love going on his program.
He's the man.
He's joined us a couple times now here at SEC Media Days. It might be a little bit of an annual thing that we do a little bit of a catch-up, but you can watch the full interview with Andy Staples on Sooner Scoop editorial page, getting a complete kind of insight, which I think Oklahoma fans are going to like into 2024, because I think he's probably a little bit higher on Oklahoma than some of the other national media pals out in the lobby right now. So we also were able to catch up with Toby Rowland, the voice of Oklahoma. And, I think it's jumping back into the Oklahoma bubble. It's always good to get a little bit of perspective from the voice.
I thought he had some really good thoughts on just the feeling around media days because, like you said, it's good catching up with people, but we're also like, what do you think about Oklahoma? Because I think that, again, we get caught up in what we think and what people in the program think and all of that. what do the outsiders think? And I think Toby gave a really good answer about there's a lot of people here that I think the respect level for Oklahoma isn't as high as maybe it should be. And that's not just for the 2024 season. I think that we think that OU could have a good year. The schedule, we'll see how it plays out. But I think people forget that OU is one of those blue bloods. They aren't coming in here to just take a back seat to somebody. I think that they think they're going to be able to compete at a high level, and I think Toby kind of spoke to that and he went off a little bit. As you know, Toby Rowland isn't somebody that's going to go on some crazy rants or anything, but I think he made his point clear.
Not necessarily a tirade by any means, but I do think Oklahoma fans will like Toby Rowland's answer when you asked him kind of, what's the general pulse around this lobby here with all these national media folk about Oklahoma moving into the SEC in 2024?
I think you got more faith in the patience of Sooner fans than maybe I do. I don't know. I mean, we're in year 3 now, and he showed tremendous growth from year 1 to 2. And even though they're going into the SEC, and even though they've got an incredibly difficult schedule and a redshirt freshman quarterback, if they're not in the college football playoff, Sooner fans aren't going to be happy. They're not going to say, hey, good try, just make sure in 5 years you're better. So I think it's important for him to get into the college football playoff this year, and that's going to be really hard to do. You're probably going to have to win 9 games. I think 9 with this schedule probably gets you in. We're all just guessing and how the 12-team playoff's going to work. But this is Oklahoma. This isn't Arkansas. Of all of the expansion teams in the history of the SEC, none of them come close to the tradition Oklahoma's bringing in here. And so I don't mean to put more pressure on him, but I think as far as the fans are concerned, like, they need to be a college football playoff team this year and not just show signs of getting better. They need to be competing for championships and show that they're one of the big boys.
Yeah.
Toby's the best. He really is the best.
Awesome.
He really is the best. And I'm excited to see some of the Griffin Media stuff that he announced on Tuesday, moving forward here over the next couple of years, see how that kind of comes to fruition. But it's going to be good to see Toby back on the television. There's no doubt about that. And a lot of Oklahoma content, too.
And I think also just, I mentioned this to him in the interviews, like, it's going to be awesome to see him call in some of those environments because he has some of the most legendary OU football calls of all time. And
certainly of like this quote-unquote modern era, whatever you want to call it.
And I think that, with the places they're going to play at, and I think what are going to be a lot of close games this year, and even moving forward, past this season, I think he's going to have some unreal calls. And he's just an awesome dude, He's great.
He talked about some of the places he's excited to go and call some games to, which you can, much like the Andy Staples interview, you can catch the Toby Rowland interview in full that George conducted on the Soonerscoop.com editorial page. Last but not least, we heard from Steve Sarkisian. I think that, the 2 newcomers here in the SEC world, Oklahoma came on Tuesday, Texas was today on Wednesday, and obviously some high expectations for the Horns going into a season in which they're coming off of a college football semifinal appearance, maybe shoulda, woulda, coulda, got to a national championship game, and the returning Quinn Ewers. There's a lot of expectations. We were talking to some Texas media folk on Tuesday night about that.
You know what's interesting about Texas, and especially at these media days, is I don't think Sark got almost any questions about OU other than the OU-Texas game, which we'll play that clip in a second. But OU got a ton of questions about Texas, and it comes from Texas media. Like, I think the Texas media loves to ask questions about Texas to people that are not Texas, if that makes sense. Yeah. I thought it was interesting. There weren't a lot of questions at all to Sark about OU. But, yeah, I mean, look, they come into this season with massive expectations. I think people think that they can be a national title contender. I'm not there yet with them. I think they're going to be really good. They could maybe make it to the SEC championship game. I know Nick Saban picked him to make it to the title game. But, look, they have to replace a lot of guys that went in the NFL draft. But Sark came out and said today he thinks it's the deepest team that he's had in 4 years at Texas. So I'm really interested to see what the Longhorns do this year.
If nothing else, there's a lot of confidence in Austin right now, and especially
which is nothing new.
No, it's not. But I think that you can't fall back on we were able to get over the hump. We were able to actually do something a year ago that a lot of people predicted for a long time. It seems like almost a decade. Sark does have a unique experience, though. He's coached in the Iron Bowl. He's coached in the Red River Shootout down in Dallas.
The Egg Bowl.
The Egg Bowl. He's coached in everything.
Yeah.
My God. He's been everywhere.
Yeah.
That's why we like Sark, kind of. He was asked, though, today, about the Iron Bowl versus the Red River rivalry. And I know that yesterday we kind of talked about, like, the horns down thing. It's really not a story to me. But at least when you're talking about the rivalry game, there is some legs to it.
Look, I've never been to the Iron Bowl, so I can't say that it's, I would assume it is one of the greatest, if not the greatest rivalry in sports. But from my experience, OU Texas is the best. And, I think anybody that's been to the game, which a lot of people watching this have been to the game, respect it. They love it. There's a true hatred between the fan bases. I do think there's a little bit respect there, too, because of how great the two programs have been throughout college football's history. So hearing Sark talk about that today, especially as someone that has, like you said, experienced the two, because there's been a lot of debate online, which – it's July.
Every fan base is going to say their rivalry game is the biggest, right?
Right. And so it's like, you take it with a grain of salt, but I think Sark made some good points about it today of just how special it is.
It's never bad to hear another, opinion, too, from the north side of the Cotton Bowl, which Oklahoma fans certainly don't get to a whole lot. But here is Steve Sarkisian talking about the OU Texas game.
Well, I think this, and I've been fortunate. Like I said, I've been part of the Iron Bowl. I've been part of the Apple Cup in Washington. I've been part of SC, UCLA. I've been part of some great games. This is the most unique game for sure that I've ever been a part of. When you pull into the state fair and you start smelling those corn dogs and turkey legs, and there's fans from both teams, and then you get in those locker rooms, and the locker rooms literally are 20 feet apart, and you're staring at each team, and one goes first, the next one goes next, and it can get a little contentious in there, but that's okay. And as we come out of that tunnel, and that's OU's tunnel, and we're staring at a sea of burnt orange, and you just want to get there. And it's a unique game because half of the game is a home game. The other half of the game is a road game. And I had to learn that the hard way in year one. We got stuck in OU's end, and we were false start, and we couldn't do anything right. And so you have to play to that style of game. But it being split right down the 50, it's the who's who on the sidelines. And I'll tell you this about both teams. Both teams play as hard as they possibly can play in that game. And again, that's to take nothing away from any other great game that I've been part of, but this one is uniquely special. I think Norman's about 2.5 hours from Dallas. We're about 3 hours from Dallas. And the fact that we kind of come upon the state fair here in Dallas is really special. And so it's a game that I'm humbled and honored that I get to be part of. I'm getting to go coach in my fourth one, and looking forward to the opportunity.
Truly one of the more unique settings in sport. I don't care, really, it doesn't even just have to be college football. I think you can put any sport. There's not a lot that compares to the OU Texas game, the uniqueness of it, the feeling of that morning, I guess the feeling of that afternoon this year as the game moves to 2:30, which is going to be a little bit kind of weird. But at the same time, it did get the juices flowing a little bit. I guess I'm the sucker here because at the end of our coverage from SEC Media Days, I'm pretty juiced for the start of football season, which, by the way, not too far away. I mean, we basically are talking about 2 weeks from today, Oklahoma will be on the practice field.
Yeah, I believe July 31st is kind of what we've heard as the start date for fall camp. So going to be exciting to get out there. Like you said, SEC Media Days is kind of the last little thing, the last little hump you have to get over to get into football season, and it's going to be exciting. I know we'll have plenty of coverage. It was great to be out here in Dallas and kind of, like you said, get to know some of the other media members and also kind of get their thoughts, because I always think that that's unique to hear what they think about Oklahoma. So really productive week. I know the audio issues sucked yesterday, but hopefully you don't screw that up today, Eddie.
That's a lot of pressure, and I might, and I already apologize. I apologized at the beginning, so are you going to get 2 apologies out of me? Possibly, probably.
It was honestly probably Carrie's fault.
No, it was my fault. It was definitely my fault. We will be back, though, on Friday. I think we're going to kind of shoot just a big wrap-up from everything that happened here.
There's a lot more that we didn't get into. I mean, there's a lot of stuff, I think, from Billy Bowman that was interesting,
Sure.
Danny Stutzman, obviously Jackson Arnold. So kind of getting into that stuff I think will be fun. There's some clips from Brent Venables, too. So it'll be good to get back into the Scoop office and kind of break it all down.
Headed back on I-35 from Dallas at SEC Media Days for George Stoia. I'm Eddie Radosevich. See you right back here on the Soonerscoop.com YouTube page.